So today we're going to be talking about presentation. This is a new tool for the studio, and I kind of wanted to break that down into a presentation about how it works, show you a little bit how you get it set up in your project. Just as a quick intro, I'm Noah. I'm a solution engineer here at Sanity. I work with our enterprise customers to help them leverage the platform, create remarkable experiences for their customers, and achieve their business goals. So just to run through a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. First off, what is presentation? How does it benefit my editors as a developer? What is the experience like for a content editor? We'll do a little bit of a demo. I'll show you what it feels like for a content editor to be in the studio in the presentation tool. And then we'll kind of break down how it works at a lower level, what is going on behind the scenes, its relationship to loaders, and other features in the studio, how it just looks to and works behind the scenes. And then finally, we're going to be talking about how to set it up, a quick kind of run through of the code that's required to get this into your studio. And then finally, just where can I learn more? There's going to be some guides and links to other resources, materials, things to help you get started after you take away from this presentation. So let's start with what is presentation? It is a new tool for the studio. It complements the structure tool, which formerly known as Desk. But it provides a single place where content editors can both edit that structured content that you've set up for them in your Sanity schemas, but also gives them a way to preview that content directly in the studio. So it's kind of shortening that feedback loop between making changes to content, seeing it live, in this case, maybe on a website, maybe a mobile kiosk, anything that's kind of web-centric that you want to place into presentation. And then it also provides things like click to edit, using those overlays and content source maps to understand if I'm looking at, maybe it's the front page of my website, where is this content coming from in Sanity? I give my editors a way to click to edit directly into that field. And it also gives me some, affordances like flipping between preview and published content, looking at a website on a mobile view, even navigating around the website. So it's kind of meant to be this kind of one-stop shop for visual editing tasks that need that kind of visual context. And this is kind of the value proposition here. This is how it benefits editors. Working in the desk, there's a lot of great ways to structure desk navigation. You have a very structured content model, navigating around that, making changes between related content models. But sometimes it's easier to just have that visual context. You can see if there's disparate document types that are coming together to form that layout, maybe they don't have, references necessarily between those content types, but the context of maybe it's my homepage, maybe it's that kiosk. I need to be able to see what is the visual context here? What is it kind of bringing these content types together? So that's kind of the idea here. We want to be able to do that in a single place and not have to maybe jump around to different documents or different views of our documents in structure. And this is a complement to structure. It doesn't replace it. It's just more suited for maybe more visual tasks that kind of need that full visual context. And as I mentioned previously, there's affordances for toggling between production and preview content. So if I need as a content editor, kind of verify, okay, I'm making a change here. How does this look in preview? How will it look? How will it affect my production site? I can flip between those two different modes. And I think really important for the content editor is that kind of quick visual feedback. So, we'll talk about this a little bit later of how this is actually working behind the scenes, but this idea of having optimistic local updates that really tighten that feedback loop. So as I'm making edits in the studio, every keystroke, every click that I'm making as a content editor, I really have that confidence that, okay, what I'm changing here is showing up exactly how I expect it to in the view, and we kind of make sure that there's a way to kind of see that in one place. And I think part of this comes from, structured content is a really powerful philosophy, how you approach a content model, how you think about relationships between documents. But the burden should not be on the editor to understand that whole picture. An example would be maybe there's many different aspects of our content model that's coming together to create a page. We sort of had an example internally of our own pricing page. There are a lot of different things that affect how that pricing page looks on our website, how the marketing team interacts with that content. And so the burden shouldn't be on the content editor to understand how this whole content model is put together, where the particular document that they need to edit some, specific pricing guideline or something in the text. Like, we want them to be able to just see that page, that pricing page, click to edit, because they need to just jump to something. It might be deeply nested in our content model. It might be in a place where it may not, it's not immediately clear where it is. So to be able to just jump straight to that place in the studio in a single tool is like really important for helping editors think less really about working with the content model. And also seeing, again, seeing these changes in a visual surface just kind of reinforces, and reinforces that confidence and the changes that someone is making to the content model, to the content actually showing up in the way that they expect it to. So we'll kind of touch on this a little bit, but you can have multiple presentations. We'll kind of see that in the demo in a moment. So let's go ahead and switch on over to my demo. So this is a hydrogen storefront. I'm rendering this page. This is a front page of my storefront. There's sort of a brand story that's going on here. I have a couple of different components that I can use to build this layout. So just to kind of give a quick tour of what we're looking at. So this is the presentation tool. You'll see at the top that I'm in the storefront presentation. I have another presentation of what this content looks like in an in-store kiosk. And then I also have structure, formerly known as desk. So to kind of start at the top here. So if I hover over my web view, so this is an iframe, just embedding my website into presentation. It tells me where I am on my current website, or the current preview URL. It tells me that I'm in click to edit mode. So I have these kind of X-ray goggles. I can look at this content, see what content is coming from Sanity, hover over it to see, okay, this is something that I can interact with as an editor and manipulate. I can also switch between drafts and preview and published content. So this gives me like an easy way to flip between those two states as an editor. And I can also do things like, okay, I want to look at how this looks on a mobile device in this case. So some responsive design of our website can kind of be tested. So then on the right side, we have, your typical structure form. This is, what an editor sees when they're in structure, but kind of bringing that into the presentation tool, the same fields that they would see in that structure. But the new piece here is what we're calling location or document resolvers. I need to be able to see for this home page document, it's a single document type, it's a singleton that I use on my website. I can see, in this case, these are my two presentations that I have for this document where it's being used. I can see the particular URL, and then I can even title that. So we'll go into a little bit of how you configure this and set this up. But as a content editor, now I can understand, okay, if I'm changing the hero text of this homepage document, I can know and confidently know that these are the places where it's being used. These are the places that I can preview that content, and then I get that live feedback directly on the left side to see what it looks like. So I can make some changes here, no compromises, and environmentally friendly. Delete friendly. So all of those keystrokes, all of those changes that I'm making in this content model are getting optimistically applied to my website, so I can see them in one place. But maybe there are other things that I need to do here in the context of this document editor. So we still have things like comments. So maybe I want to ask Knut, hey, I don't think this is a short enough title. So maybe we need to do some communication between content editors. So all the tools that you're already using in your structure, you can bring them over into presentation. So it's meant to be, it's really just that side-by-side view, split view, but you still have all the same affordances for the content editor, AI assist, the rest of it. So let's move on down to my layout. Maybe I want to add a new module to my layout. I have some components here that I can choose from as a content editor. Let's choose this call out block, and I have a little AI assist instruction that's going to take my brand story and just give me a quick little blurb about it. So here comes AI assist. While AI assist is working on that, let's make sure that this links to my story. So this is our brand narrative. Read our story. And there we go. So I have this new call out block. My validation's telling me it's a little bit long, but we'll come back to that later. Maybe I'll put another comment for Knut to take a look at. Let's move that up here. Here it comes, and we can move around these modules on the page, interact with this content type, and then those the loaders that we're going to talk about in a moment are going to kick in, make sure that this content is being previewed and up to date for the editor. So if I need to, though, as a content editor, maybe I need to switch between structure and desk. So I can do that. So I can jump over. Maybe I need to understand, I need more real estate, or I need to do another task that involves looking at other content types or navigating through this content model. So there is a button to go between the two views. So I don't have to, click over, navigate to that content type again. I'm always going to be in context of the content that I'm working on. So here we're flipped over to the structure. This is my homepage. I happen to be localizing or internationalizing this content. So it's going to put me on the right homepage, which is the English one. Here we are. We made those changes. We made some comments here. So all this is going to be the same across these two different views, but really just kind of bringing that visual context back. And then I can flip back over to my structure by going back to the storefront. So kind of like tightening that feedback loop again. And another aspect that I want to call out here is, these source maps, the information about where this content is coming from in Sanity is going to help me understand what documents are being used on this page. So in this case, we have a lot of different things that are coming together to make this layout. We have products, we have pages, we have maybe information, the settings about our site that create the navigation. So in structure, you can also, if you're not clicked on a piece of content, you can also see at a high level, what is going on this page to kind of put it together. And then of course I can jump into a particular model or click to edit into any one of these fields. And I mentioned, it's important to be able to get at things that may be deeply nested. Maybe they're objects, maybe they're, things that require a lot of different levels in your structured content model. But for content editor, now they have a way to just, I want to edit this image of my product. I can just click on it. It takes me right to, in this case, this was embedded inside of a call to action module into this particular sub-module of that call to action. So I'm right here in place. I can make these changes in situ and not have to jump around to different places. So let's talk a little bit about what is actually happening behind the scenes and kind of break it down a little bit. So here's kind of a high-level diagram of the different pieces that are interacting here to create this presentation. So, this is my studio. It's talking to Content Lake. That real-time collaboration of the platform that's so fundamental to the platform is happening behind the scenes. So as I'm making changes, even if it's in this presentation tool, that same process of just real-time communication back to Content Lake is going to be happening. But for presentation, so it'll first request that content from Content Lit, and you'll also include source maps. And this is how the overlays at the end of this process get rendered. So you'll see an overlay here. So this is my app. My Hydrogen storefront has been set up with loaders. It's been made presentation aware. So once my rendering kicks in, so I'll have that loader. It'll request that grok query from the backend. It'll include those content source maps. So this sort of orange call out here is just to show this kind of critical hot path of data, if you want to think of it like that. So I'm going into the loader. It's rendering my markup, in this case, JSX into HTML for my web page. And it's also encoding those source maps either in Stega or in any other way to kind of encode those source maps into my elements. It's rendering markup and then presenting that inside this iframe. So that's what's kind of handling the presentation of these overlays and in the actual content itself, in this case, my homepage. And then this little feedback loop is what's going to kick in. So on the client side, these loaders are going to be, or rather the presentation tool is going to be broadcasting the changes that I'm making. So maybe I'm in here making changes to my product page or to a particular feature of my design. All of those changes are applied and broadcasted over the browser API, specifically post message. So it's going to subscribe, post those changes to my loader. So my front end can be aware of optimistic updates. So it really keeps it in this tight, like hot data path. So it doesn't really have to go out to Content Lake again. It's really just all going to be client side. It's going to be broadcasting those changes. The loader is going to be re-rendering. Markup's going to be presented. So that's what is responsible for that live preview setup in the studio, in presentation in particular. So in order to set this up, there are two kind of prerequisites. One is having the latest version of Sanity, specifically anything after version 3.20. And you also will need RxJS. And we'll talk about why the RxJS dependency has been added here in just a moment, but that is going to be responsible for some observable subscriptions that we're going to be doing for the location of our documents. And then the other thing is, which is outside of the scope of this talk, which is your front end needs to be made presentation aware using loaders, overlays. And for more information on that, you can check out the documentation and some of our starters that I'll be linking to. So these are the two prerequisites. You have the latest version of Sanity, RxJS, and your front end has already been made presentation aware. The first step is to import the new presentation tool. It's from this import path. So I'm going to kind of highlight each step. And there's really, these 3 steps. It's pretty straightforward to get set up in a new studio or in your existing studio. Import the tool, add it to your plugins. It'll take 2 configuration options. This one is required, the preview URL. So there's some defaults, but typically you'd kind of set this in one of your environment variables in whatever setup you're using. And then eventually you're just passing it into the presentation tool as configuration. And this is what's responsible. So behind the scenes, that loader is listening to those changes that are being broadcast. So there needs to be, it's sort of like an allow list. You want to make sure that only your studio, wherever it lives, maybe it's localhost because you're developing locally and it's on a different port. Maybe it's your production URL or staging URL, or maybe it's on the same domain, but you need to set, this is a required property because you need to kind of allow the right connection between the two setups. And then finally, you'll pass it optionally a location resolver. And this is a separate file, which we'll kind of talk about here, where essentially what we're doing here is we're telling presentation in response to changes that are happening in the form editor. Specifically, I'm switching, if I click to edit something, maybe it brings me into a post document. Presentation will call this location resolver so that way you have to kind of tell it, okay, you're passing me a post document. So here we're kind of switching on the type of the document that's passed in. So 2 things come in, the params, which is the ID and the type of that document, and some context, which includes the document store. So this is how you listen to those changes. But just kind of step through this. We have, for a post type, we're manually telling it, okay, find me the document in the document store that has that ID. So here we're finding that and project the slug and the title off of it. And we'll use the preview drafts perspective. That way we get, draft and published content overlaid on top of each other. And then those params are just, ID and type again. And then what we're listening to is that document. So now this is an observable. Document store returns, this listen query returns an observable noted by the $sign at the end of it. And this is why we need RxJS, because we need to now map over the events that are emitted from the document, changes to title, or maybe we're switching forms. So all this is kind of happening reactively, which is why we need RxJS to manage some of these dependencies here. So we're listening to that document. We're mapping over those events that come through. And then we're checking, okay, is there a document? Does the document have a slug? So just some validation to make sure that when there's a navigation or we change something, we can actually show the right location back to the form editor. So if not, we'll just return here. If we have a document, let's pull out the title and slug. And then this is really what presentation is looking for. So we saw for my homepage, there were those 2 presentation accordions. Inside of them were they each had 1 entry. This is kind of how you tell the system, okay, these are the locations of this document. In this case, we know that every post lives under this post's kind of collection. We'll pass this back as the href. Maybe we want to title this. There's also ways to kind of style this visually to the content editor. But in this case, this post lives in 2 places, the kind of posts collection and also on our root of our URL. So this is really what presentation is interested in. All this is just to tell it at the end of the day, where does this document live on your website? So to find out more, there's of course documentation. This is a really good place to just kind of get a primer on it, read through the docs, kind of get familiar with what's going on behind the scenes, and there's setup and things like that. But if you want to have some, maybe, you want to just set up from one of our templates. There are a bunch of prefab templates. There's a Remix one that includes includes this whole setup. So you can use that as kind of a reference, or you can even start there from a starter project. Yeah, happy coding, and thank you. Thank you.